Call the meeting to order at 6:31. There is a quorum present. 10 members are here of the 11. Mark Poulos is the only one absent. Additionally, we have the mayor, city corporation council in attendance, CSG and PRA, and we also have, I think, Downs here online, representatives from them, and we'll move on. Oh, right, Bob, sorry. That's me. In the back there. So next order of business, approval of minutes from the previous meeting, December 19th minutes. Did I get a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll make the motion.
By Stacy Gould. Oh, and I will ask you to state your name, please, before any motions or speaking or anything like that, just for the record. Thank you. And I'll note that this meeting is being recorded, and all votes will be by roll call. Motion by Stacy Gould. Could I get a second? Second by Greg. Thank you, Greg. I'm gonna blame the secretary for making people laugh. Any additions, corrections, or deletions to the minutes?
Mark, this is Pete. I submitted some minor comments, and also in paragraph 6, we need to delete the third sentence. I had kicked that back to Greg, and he said, yes, we should delete that. And Catherine, I apologize. I can't read it in my notes because it's darkened out. If you can read it to others.
And no, she made the modification in the draft that was presented. We have the hard copy sitting in front of us now, Peter.
Okay, good.
So she did make that change. Any others? Sheila Hayes.
Just that I believe Mayor Nigel was an ex officio member at the meeting.
At last month's meeting.
At last month's meeting.
Oh, right.
It should be added. You're right.
Correct.
So you're under the ex officio.
And I'll say technically that certainly some of the people, like the people from DRA and Downs and CSG, are not ex officio members, but they work for the community.
I think Stacey was with that change a lot of their citizens. I can list.
No, yeah,
I
no.
can list them.
I would list them as
We would list them as citizen.
no, as contractors, consultants to the committee, something like that. Any other additions, corrections? Hearing none, roll call vote. I'll start with the people on Zoom. Christine DeStazio.
Yes, excuse me.
Peter,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes,
Bill Hall.
Yes.
I think that covers that. Joe DeLucia.
Yes.
Greg, you're abstaining, you weren't. Sheila Hayes.
Yeah.
Greg Galassi.
Yes.
Stacy Gould.
yeah,
And myself, yes. 9-0, 1 abstention. Please. Public comment, any public comment? First call, second call, any public comment? Third call, any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on. Presentation from Christopher Freixel. How do you pronounce? Is that how you pronounce? Freixel, okay. From Association of Builders and Contractors, Connecticut.
Is there a best place?
I would say in that area is probably the best because the camera will pick you up and stuff. Like that.
So first, thank you very much to everyone for having me. I appreciate your time and also your service. I know, it takes a lot of time to volunteer for a committee like this. So the city's lucky to have you guys. And again, I appreciate you allowing me to come and address you. My name is Christopher Freixel. I'm the president of the Connecticut chapter of the Associated Builders and Contractors. A little bit about ABC. ABC is a national association of the volunteer trade association made up of commercial industrial contractors. So across the country, we have 22,000 members. Here in Connecticut, there's roughly 235 member companies. Excuse me, that represent merit shop construction. So what we believe in, to boil it down, is that contracts should be awarded to the lowest responsible bidder, regardless of labor affiliation. We're labor organization agnostic. So it's just setting the stage for what I'll address to you this evening. Excuse me. And if anyone has questions during the presentation, please feel free to jump in. I'll try to be efficient and mindful of everyone's time. But if something pops into your mind and you want to ask it right away, please feel free. So there you go. Sorry. So first, maybe a little bit of overview based on last month's meeting, but what is a PLA? A PLA is a unique pre-bid hiring contract that sets forth specific requirements not found in most 25 states prohibit the use of PLAs because of their discriminatory and anti-competitive nature. All contractors who sign the PLA, it requires them to adhere to union work rules, recognize the union as their representative on the job, pay into union benefit funds, and hire from the union hall. So because of these terms that are harmful to open shop contractors typically will not bid on a job if it's PLA. So this data actually came out today. So this is from 2023. A record number of construction workers are choosing not to join the union. So across the country, 89.3% have chosen not to join a union. Here in Connecticut, also a record. It's never been below 14% before. 86.2% of the workforce has chosen not to join a union. And that's not to denigrate unions whatsoever. I have a lot of respect for union workers and what they do. It's just to show to you that people are choosing not to join union. Next slide, please. So again, who supports PLAs? It's the union organizations that benefit directly from project labor agreements. Again, these are pre-bid. So they are contracts with the owner, in this case, the city of Norwich, that guarantees millions of dollars of contract value without fear of competition. So that's why the unions are so supportive of them, because they don't have to worry about competition when the project goes out to bid. If they get a PLA in place, they know that they're going to get 100% of the labor. It's a marketing tool, and oftentimes, unfortunately, it's a political decision whether or not to use it. Next slide, please. So I want to make this very clear. This should not be an us versus them argument, because that's not how I see things. That's not how ABC sees things. It's really not a debate between union and non-union. It's a debate between opportunity for everyone or opportunity for a select group of the construction workforce. So again, PLAs limit workforce to only members being hired from the union hall. But if you don't use a PLA, it means that all qualified members of the construction industry, union and non-union, have an opportunity to bid the job or work on the job as skilled craftspeople. Next slide, please. So I'll cover a couple of things that PLA proponents often talk about, why you might need a PLA. One of them is safety. Really, there's no data that suggests a PLA will deliver a accident-free job. All workers, whether they are, when they're on prevailing wage jobs, whether they're open shop workers, whether they're union workers, are required to go through the same OSHA certifications. And again, you don't need a PLA for that. That is going to be in place for free. Next slide, please. No strike, no lockout. You may have seen some sample PLAs. I think the presenters last week talked about some sample PLAs. So they talk about, a guarantee that there won't be strike or lockout. So first of all, this is a solution in search of a problem. According to the Labor Action Tracker by Cornell University School of Industrial and Labor Relations, There's been no construction strikes in Connecticut since they began collecting data. We've got a 2018 PLA feasibility study, which was commissioned by the state of Connecticut, that states they are unable to confirm any instances of labor unrest, which resulted in a material delay of a construction project. So they aren't common, is my point. And if they did happen, it's sort of like I don't want to use an analogy here, but you know, they're saying we won't strike if you just give us all the work, when in fact, that shouldn't be the case. It's not an issue for open shop contractor. You don't need a PLA in order to make this happen. And that said, there are actually instances of construction unions striking on PLA jobs. Again, as I mentioned, there aren't a lot of labor unrest instances here in Connecticut, but New York City had them, Seattle had them. PLA in place, and there were work stoppages nonetheless. So again, this is not a reason to go with a PLA. Next slide. Job site regulation. So I think it was stated at the last meeting that state law was passed that guarantees PLAs won't cost more money. That isn't true. It is true that this will be a prevailing wage job. So in the state of Connecticut, any public construction project, new construction of $1 million or more, which obviously this surpasses, prevailing wage is required. So that will be in place whether there is a PLA or not. Worker classification, also state law mandates that workers on jobs must be correctly classified as employees, receive benefits. Insurance mandates, law mandates that each employer carry the appropriate workers' compensation insurance. There are state laws governing these things, whether there's a PLA or not. You do not need a PLA to require prevailing wage. That's often a misconception that people tell me, oh, we need a PLA to ensure people are paid properly. That's not the case. So, next slide. Workforce development. I know this one got a lot of attention at the last meeting. So open shop companies take advantage of apprenticeship programs. They have to, okay? ABC, 16 years ago, 17 years ago, founded the Construction Education Center. We teach apprenticeship. We have apprentices in class right now. We do OSHA certifications. We do continuing education, but it's not just us. There are a lot of organizations throughout the state that provide these apprenticeship training opportunities. And ABC members, I know the proponents talk about how much was invested nationally by their organizations. We too invest quite a bit of money, $1.5 billion just by ABC members were invested into workforce development last year, which is maybe also an opportunity for me to state, I don't represent all open shop contractors. Not all open shop contractors are members of ABC. Again, we are a volunteer trade association. So this doesn't even account for all of the workforce development by open shop contractors. That's just ABC members. So if you don't use a PLA, you have access to, yes, the union apprenticeship programs, which are very good. They do a very good job training. The union workers are very well trained, very capable, but so are open shop workers. That's the point I want to get across to everybody. If you don't use the PLA, you can access both of those things rather than just one. ABC has actually continued to push for more apprenticeship. So we have an apprenticeship hiring ratio in the state that prevents contractors from hiring apprentices. So if you're a contractor and you are at the top of your ratio, in order to hire one apprentice, I would have to hire 3 journey persons. Good luck finding 3 journey persons out there. They aren't out there. So this is a state law that is actually stopping more apprentices from getting into the construction industry. We have employers that want to hire them. We have people that want to be hired, and state law is prohibiting. So we are pushing for that. Unfortunately, we are getting opposition to that from the same exact people who are pushing for the PLA. Next slide, please. PLAs and local workers. This again is a myth. Despite promises, the PLA only includes the best, a good faith effort to hire local workers and to hit those hiring goals. last meeting, I think Ms. Gould may have asked the question, how are you going to guarantee that you're gonna hit those hiring goals? And there was a long-winded answer, and the actual answer is that they can't. They can't guarantee that. And if they could, it would be a guarantee in the project. And if they didn't hit those hiring goals, there would be consequences. Ask yourself, when you sign that PLA, are there any consequences for not hitting hiring goals? The answer is no. And in fact, as I mentioned earlier, the majority of the construction industry has decided not to go into a union. So if you are discriminating against those open shop workers, you're preventing a lot of city residents who work in the construction industry and who have opted not to join the union. You are preventing them from even the opportunities to work on this job. Next slide. So if you've picked up a newspaper or turned on the TV sometime in the last year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, you probably have heard that we had a critical shortage of skilled labor. Okay, I've got a couple of headlines here, but this slide, I could have 15 slides of headlines about the skilled labor shortage. Current estimates show that we need 600, and this is a national number, 650,000 additional workers to meet current demand and backlog. Okay, 650,000. So given the critical, persistent, and growing shortage of skilled labor, this is the absolute worst time to cut out 86% of the construction industry from an opportunity to work on this project. Next slide, please. Minority business enterprises, small businesses. Okay, I looked today at the state websites. This data is from today. Across the state of Connecticut, and we are talking about DAS pre-qualified contractors. Okay? These contractors have gone through the process of getting pre-qualified with the state so they can work on these public projects. There are 531 MBEs and SBEs throughout the state of Connecticut that are DAS pre-qualified. 106 of those are union contractors. If limited to just minority business enterprises, 232 are certified DAS pre-qualified, and only 47 are union. And then if we dial that down even further, just in London County, 31 SBE, MBE, DAS pre-qualified contractors, and only 2 of those are union contractors. This is relevant, as I'll show you in a minute, because again, despite what PLA proponents say, open shop contractors aren't going to bid on this if you put a PLA on. So you're going to minority workers have been historically underrepresented in unions. You can see that bear out in the data, and they're not going to have a fair opportunity to bid on this project. Next slide, please. On time, on budget. You may hear, although I'm hearing it less and less, you may hear that the PLA guarantees the project is on time, it guarantees the project is on budget. Of course, it never says that in the PLA language, but that's what PLA proponents like to talk about. They talk about how it, changes the work rules and everyone's more organized and so things go more smoothly. Unfortunately, that's not the case when we look at a lot of PLA projects. That's not to say every PLA project is over budget or off schedule. Certainly not the case, but they don't guarantee it. And oftentimes they actually do lead to cost overrun. Next slide, please. So this study was brought up last meeting, so I have to touch on it. This was a statistical study completed in 2020 by the Beacon Hill Institute. It reviewed 95 Connecticut, again, specific to Connecticut school construction projects from 2001 to 2019. I encourage you to read the study because even the criticisms of it are never about the actual statistical analysis that was done. But if you review it, you'll see that they conclude PLAs were responsible for almost a 20% increase in costs compared to similar projects that did not use the PLA. Again, specific to Connecticut school construction. So, this isn't monopoly money. This is $385 million. 20% is $77 million. So what often happens when these projects run over budget, you either have to go back to the taxpayers and ask for more money, or you have to cut back on the design of the project in order to make it fit into budget, which has happened a number of times. Next slide, please. Here's one that they didn't bring up, and this was done by the RAND Corporation. You can do your own research into the RAND Corporation. We had nothing to do with paying for this study. We didn't ask for the study. I don't know what made them perform the study, but the findings are pretty interesting. So they looked into affordable housing projects in Los Angeles. And what they found is that the use of PLA with housing unit-based threshold reduced the total housing produced, and it increased the costs. Not only did it increase the cost, but it increased the cost by 14.5%. Okay, so what happened to Los Angeles is they paid more and they got less. It resulted in approximately 800 units of housing not being built. Bidders were less interested in the projects that use PLAs, and they proposed projects that fell under the threshold for appeal, which were smaller projects, which is why fewer projects were actually completed. Which is again 11% of the total housing produced. It resulted in 11% fewer units being produced. Next slide, please. So they mentioned last month 3 studies. So I figured I'd at least have to address these 3 studies. So the first one is by these individuals, Dale Bellman and Russell Ormiston. They refer to Beacon Hill's work, by the way, as pioneering research, and they state they cannot invalidate their work. These individuals concluded that PLAs resulted in a 3.3% increase in construction costs. Again, these are their studies. And if you look into the individuals that performed the study, because they called in to question our study, you can see that they all serve on boards run by the AFL-CIO, the North American Building Trades unions, the carpenters unions. So these are not exactly unbiased studies, and they actually support what we put out there. The second one was by Fred Kotler. This is actually not a study. I also encourage you to look at this. It is in no way a study. It doesn't consider the arguments of anti-PLA opinions. And again, this individual worked for AFL-CIO at the time he wrote the study. The third one they mentioned was the San Diego Unified School District study, which is interesting. And again, he brought this up, not me. We'll go into the next slide. So the San Diego Unified School District, what they found is that the number of general contractor bidders and participating subcontractors per project has declined for PSA projects. So in this study, PSA is the same as PLA. They have a different term that they use. So general contractor bidders and subcontractors decline for PSA projects. The construction manager interviews unanimously indicated that quality is the same. Okay, no difference in quality. The mean number of bidders per PSA project, 6.2, is less than the number for non-PSAs, 11.7. Okay, number of plan holders for non-PSAs greatly exceed the number for PSAs, and the number of contractors who participated in the required for the property walkthroughs, 40 for non-PSA, non-PLA projects versus 24.4 for the PLA projects. Okay, again, this is the study they brought up, not me. Now, this last one I found interesting. It reads, bids continue to be under budget, although somewhat less under budget for PSA projects than for non-PSA projects. So they say the PLA project was under budget, non-PLA project was a little bit more under budget. So what does that mean? Next slide.
Wait,
So,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
Could you go
please.
back there?
Sure. This slide, I think is.
Thank you. I just wanted to finish reading it.
Absolutely, and I'm happy to provide this to you as well. Yeah, follow-up questions afterwards. So, review of internal documents show that the PLA projects were under budget, 9.7% under budget. But the non-PLA projects were 31.6% under budget. So when they say the PLA was under budget, just not quite as much under budget, we're talking about a 21.9% difference. And they also failed by quite a bit. San Diego's much larger metro area than Norwich is, but they failed quite a bit to hit those hiring goals that I was talking about. Again, no consequences because it's a good faith effort, not a guarantee. But I got to stress, this is one of the studies that the pro PLA folks put out there for consideration. Next slide, please. Okay, so how do PLAs increase costs? I'll go through some of these things. Labor costs, again, contractors can't use most or all of their existing workforce if they sign a PLA in their open shop. There are inefficient union work rules. So the union work rules are incredibly siloed. Everyone's got very specific jobs, whereas the open shop workers are able to multi-skill, making them more efficient on the job. Double health and pension costs to open shop contractors who pursue the PLA. I'll talk about a little bit more. Compliance costs, there's attorney costs, delays with complying with the PLA, collective bargaining agreements, paying into the union benefits plan. There's a multi-employer pension plan withdrawal liability. I'll address a little bit more. And then competitive costs. This is big. Reduction in competitive bidding has an extreme effect on the cost of the construction projects. Those projects with less competition have higher costs. Despite our studies showing that, it stands to reason as well. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, PLAs depress competition. Most of the construction industry here in Connecticut and everywhere else is open shop. So fewer bidders result in less competition in the bidding process and ultimately higher costs. So I pulled this quote, which came from meeting minutes. And I don't know this individual, but he does work for ONG, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And he says at bid time, when you expect 7 or 8 bids, you get 3 or 4. He's referring to a PLA because they were considering use of PLA in this project. The more bids, the more competitive the bidder for the project. So again, this is coming from ONG. It's not coming from NBC. Yes.
Okay. Due to the restrictive nature of the PLA, what are you basing most, if not all, of the bid on?
I'll get into that a little bit more.
That's a pretty
Absolutely.
almighty clause.
Yes. So I will address that, and if I don't address it early enough, you let me know.
I would.
Okay. Next slide, please. Why the open shop won't bid? So law states, and this was stated last meeting, which is absolutely true. The law states union and non-union contractors are allowed to bid on PLAs. It's very clear. Just because it's written in state statute doesn't mean that in practice it happens. So here are some of the reasons why open shop contractors won't bid. The union hiring requirement, union representation and work rules, union contribution requirement, and double benefit pay. So I'll touch on each of these. Next slide, please. So this requires contractors to hire from the union halls. States it in the PLA. Every PLA I've ever seen has a requirement that you hire from the union the union home. Open shop contractors have employees, sorry. Many of these employees have worked for them for decades, okay? They know their families, maybe they even sponsor the little kids' T-ball teams. They don't want to leave their employees on the sidelines, right? To go bid a school construction project and then hire unknown workers from the bench of union. They don't want to do it. They want to keep their people employed, okay, which they can't do if they're working on a PLA project. Next slide, please. Union representation. So it requires contractors to recognize the union as representative knowledge. Open shop contractors have to sign a document saying they recognize the union as the representative on the job. All workers must abide by union work rules. These are inefficient work rules, again, as I mentioned earlier, that are incredibly silent. So if I'm driving a truck and I come across a piece of PVC in the road, right? And I can't get my truck past it, I can't get out of the truck and pick up that piece of PVC and move it. That's someone else's job. Okay. If I'm an electrician and I can't get to an electrical panel because there's a box of tiles there, I'm not allowed to move that box of tiles. That's someone else's job. So there are inefficient work rules that require more people to do the same work. Not that these folks aren't qualified to do that work, they are, but these are how they silo the responsibilities on a job site. If I'm an open shop contractor, that's not how I operate. That's not the business model I've chosen. I don't want to do it on an important job. Next slide, please. Double benefits. So PLAs require non-signatory contract with open shop contractors to pay health and welfare fringe benefits to union benefit funds, even if they have existing high quality plans. So this also gets to the question you were asking. If I'm an open shop contractor and I pay into my employees 401k and I'm contributing to their healthcare, right? If I go work on a PLA, I don't stop doing that. I don't stop contributing to their 401k and health plan, but I also have to contribute to the union plan while I'm on the PLA.
Isn't it true that that can be waived in the PLA?
Not all of those payments.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but you're wrong about that.
Okay, well, we can take a look at that.
I mean, that was one of my biggest concerns, but
Exactly
then
right.
they talked, I didn't want to, I wouldn't want to see companies being forced to double dip like that, but that's
Okay.
not the case.
All right, well, I'm happy to look at a sample PLA that they sent along and we can address that. And if a contractor is paying into those, there's a withdrawal liability. So if there's an underfunded plan and a contractor is contributing to it, they can't just pull out because they're responsible for the unfunded liability within that one, which can amount to a lot of money, which is another reason open shop contractors really don't like to bid on this. Next slide. So working under a PLA, and this is true, certainly is true on the Torrington PLA. If I'm an open shop contractor, right, and I have my employees, and the employee comes onto the job, they've got to pay into the union representation fee. They're not getting that. Okay. And so again, I don't want to subject my employees to that. Another reason open shop contractors won't bid on those projects. Next slide, please. So we have a study that shows that open shop workers working on PLAs are subject to paying these funds. So I'll share this study with you guys. And it can amount to as much as 34%. So they're paying into the pension allocation, they're paying the union dues withholding, they're paying the healthcare premium, and they're not getting that money back. That amounts to a lot of money for these workers, right?
So you're raising that issue again in this 34% when we just told you that it is not true.
Okay, well,
That's not necessarily the case. It can be true in some cases, but it's not.
I haven't seen the
necessarily-
PLA, so you know.
That can be, those are all subject to.
So when I see the PLA, I mean, we certainly reopen that conversation. Maybe it isn't true.
Well, just understand, because that was a big deal to us and we asked those specific questions.
Understood. I appreciate that very much. Next slide. Please. So again, on multi-employer pension plans, these things are in trouble. President Biden, I meant to include a couple of headlines from this one as well, but he included a $94 billion bailout of the multi-employer pension plans. So under federal law, if one of these MEPs is determined to be in critical and declining status, critical status, or endangered status, notice must be provided to participants. So according to 2021 notices, 35 of 61 in critical and declining, 40 of the 83 in critical, 35 of the 43 in endangered status are in the construction industry. Again, this is another reason people are choosing not to join the unions. The pension plans are in trouble. And not only that, you don't own the pension. So when you retire, okay, and say you want to go teach somewhere that the unions don't approve of, they can take your pension away. Just another reason why there's declining membership. And again, why open shop contractors don't want to bid on these projects. Next slide, please. So again, you don't have to take it from ABC. I know I'm up here representing the members, but let's look at AGC, the Associated General Contractors. According to the AGC, they too see that, again, in this case, GMLA is a government mandated labor agreement. That's what we're talking about here. GMLA can increase the cost of a project for a union contractor faced with uncertainties. Many contractors will simply decline to bid. GMLAs remove the free market economic forces that underlie both the competitive bidding process. They subvert the objective of those laws in that process and make it difficult, if not impossible, for the public to benefit from the full competition that it is entitled to expect. So this is AGC. Here in Connecticut, you may recognize some of the AGC members. They do include Downs, ONG, Gilbane, Manafort, Turner, etc. But this, again, if you don't want to take information from ABC, this is enough. Next slide, please. They also surveyed their members in 2022, okay? And they surveyed them about project labor agreements. 88% responded PLAs would raise costs compared to 0% responding it would lower costs. 82% responded it would be harder to subcontract with small disadvantaged businesses compared to 5% responding it would be easier. 78 responded it would be harder to find workers and subcontractors compared to 3% who said it would be easier. And I'm missing a number on this last one here, but that's actually 73% responded it would lengthen the time to complete projects compared to 1% who said a PLA would shorten the time to complete a project. They segregated their responses. As I mentioned, AGC does include a lot of union contractors. So those that work under a collective bargaining agreement, 83% responded a project under a PLA will not have enough union workers to guarantee on time and on budget delivery because labor unions are facing shortages among the ranks. Okay, so again, I stress you, it's not the time to take a shrinking pool of workers and shrink it down even further.
Where's the source on this survey?
I can send it to you. It's from AGC's website.
Yeah, they're just saying that all of the other things that you cited had the citation on the side.
You can keep this, but I'm happy to.
Thank you.
Next slide. So this from the former chief of staff for administration and finance at UConn. He writes that it is widely known that PLAs raise the cost of a project by somewhere around 10%. In fact, UConn actively tried to limit the use of PLAs within the limits of political viability. And this is what I was talking about earlier. It comes down to politics, unfortunately, sometimes. And so the reality is of an increasingly resource constrained environment in which we find ourselves. So UConn does a lot of construction, and this individual is telling everyone, once he was free from his, bosses and control and free from political fear, he's stating that these are internal discussions they're having. They're trying to limit the use of PLAs because it's costing the school too much money. It's making it more difficult for them to be competitive as a university.
Go back for a moment more.
Yeah, sorry.
So here is this in action. This is recent. South Campus Residence Hall, $215 million project, no PLA. Construction commenced December 2022. It's on time, on budget for July 2024 completion. Roughly a third, this is something else I mentioned. A third of the subcontractors are being issued to union subcontractors. So when I say, and ADC members doing this just by happenstance, when I say ADC is union agnostic, I mean it. We will hire, our members will hire union subcontractors. It doesn't work both ways. Okay, they're not allowed to hire open shop subcontractors. Mansfield Apartments put out the bid. Again, as I said, these projects happen nearly simultaneously. December 2022. Original budget was $265 million. PLA was attached late in the process. Budget was reissued at $295 million. Low bids came in over $315 million. They pulled the project. And I don't know if they're gonna put it back out.
Since there is a big difference between, especially in that time frame, with the construction commencing and a bid going on.
Okay, well, I mean, I think we can agree they're pretty, I mean, they don't
Once a year plus, so,
Okay.
I mean, in that time, in 2021, 2022, that's right now, there's some issues, so. It's not the same thing.
Next slide, please. So, as we come into the home stretch, impact on Norwich, potential cost overruns. Again, lack of bidders. You heard it from ONG, you heard it from AGC. It may set up a scenario in which the initial project bids come in over budget. It may require the city to seek additional funding from taxpayers. Value engineering scope reduction. So again, project comes in over budget. You might have to look at ways to get under budget. You might have to cut things out, cheaper materials, maybe fewer of the design enhancements that you were hoping for. That is a common scenario. And delays, things may need to be rebid, which leads to project delays. And of course, in construction, anything delaying a project also leads to higher costs. Next slide, please. Couple case studies. Torrington High School, Torrington approved this $159 million. November 2020. 2021, they approved the PLA. December 2021, voters were asked for another $20 million. Out of 26 bid packages, only 8 had more than 3 bidders. And in fact, 10 had 2 bidders. Willimantic, this was an issue with increasing costs. And the building committee actually agreed they had to take the PLA off. City council disagreed, they kept it. So they did some value engineering to try and get back under budget. Bulkley High School, actually many of the trade packages at Bulkley had to be rebid 2 or even 3 times, including the general trades package. School's on track to be completed a year late and $61 million over budget. Bassick, lack of bidders, project started late. So it's interesting to look at the bid results. 2 packages had 3 bidders, 8 packages had 2 bidders, and you see some big ones: electrical, HVAC, plumbing, drywall, flooring, ceilings, precast painting. And actually, if you look at the bid results on, let's say, electrical, there were 2 bidders. One, I think, was, I want to say, $19 million. The second bid was like $27 million. So did that second bidder actually care about getting the project, or did they know it was a PLA and maybe they throw a big number out there, and if they got it, great, which is pretty common. Meriden, High School, also had a low number of bids, over budget by $9 million, missed hiring goals. Scope had to be reduced, project had to be rebid. Gilmartin and Dugan in Waterbury. Gilmartin bids were 29% over budget. Cuts had to be made, cheaper designs adopted to get back on track. At the same time of that project, City Hall project was being done without a PLA. It was on time, on budget. Next slide, please. New London, Penny Dover. This project bids came in millions over budget. City struggled to cut costs and quote, did extensive value engineering to get the project within budget. Project was delayed before construction began. Stay here, it's kind of our own construction boondoggle of sorts, but that started at $93 million. Now it's at least 303. But we'll see where those costs end up. That was a PLA. By the way, they received 2 bids for construction managers, both out of state contractors. It was given to Kiewit, who I think is from Omaha. Snow School in Middletown put out to bid with a PLA, received 4 bids, all over budget. They took the PLA off. They got 10 bids, and it was on budget. Unfortunately, that rebidding process caused things to be delayed, so it started late. Dunkin' Donuts Park, maybe you guys appreciate it here, because the Yardgoats started their inaugural season in Norwich, not in Hartford, where they belong. That was a PLA project. They lost an entire season in Dunkin' Donuts Park. State office building. You see 17 of the 35 bid packages received 2 bids or less. 3 packages had 0 bids. Tappan Zee Bridge, 3 months late, 900 million over budget. There were some safety concerns, whistleblower complaint. They were using robots to install bolts because there wasn't enough labor to perform those processes. Boston's Big Dig. I mean, that's kind of like the poster child for issues. That was 190% cost overrun. That too was a PLA. And these are to demonstrate that, you know, PLAs don't guarantee things are on budget or on time. In fact, you see some of these projects had to be rebid a few times. Next,
On the New York Tappan Zee Bridge
Yes.
project. Okay, now you say if you have a PLA, both union and non-union could work.
if you don't have a PLA,
If you don't, so if you have a PLA, only union workers, they can't hire non-union workers?
well, my argument, well, it's twofold. The union contractors aren't gonna hire the open shop subcontractors, but the open shop subcontractors don't want to work on PLA projects. They're allowed to legally, they don't want to.
So you're presenting a lot of information.
I understand that.
And obviously, you know, 2 sides are competing for a process. But have you cherry-picked projects to pick which ones were over budgeted as opposed to non-PLA?
Well, my point, I think, is to show that when you sign a PLA, I'm trying to demonstrate, one, it's gonna cost you a lot more money. And the question is, what are you gonna get for it? And you're not gonna get a project that is guaranteed to be on time or on budget. So certainly there are projects that are PLA that have gone well, and I'm not suggesting that isn't the case. There are also a lot of projects that weren't PLA that have gone incredibly well also. So your decision is whether or not you want to discriminate against the majority of the construction industry. And if you are going to discriminate against them, what are you going to get in return? And you're not getting.
That's a strong.
I'm a little concerned about the word you're using. You use the word unethical behavior up there with regard to the State Fair project.
Well,
Right before you put the PLA in there, you just said discriminate and then PLA in the same sentence. And it sounds to me like what you're telling us is that the non-union shops can work on these projects. They certainly can bid on these projects. They choose not to. And so the question is, and you had a slide up there that said, well, you know, why they don't choose, why, okay, well, and you said prevailing wage, and then you said multitasking. You know what multitasking says to me? Multitasking says that I'm a licensed carpenter, Okay, but if my boss tells me to go move that electrical equipment, or if my boss tells me to go install that electrical equipment, and I say no, I have to do the work because I'm responsible to multitask.
That's not true. Well,
I can work outside of my license because
Carpenter is unlicensed.
it's not effective.
Licensed trade, but no, that's not true. Your boss can't make you do work that requires a license if you don't have. So that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there are plenty of things that, you know, you or I could certainly do that doesn't require a license. But because of,
Name one.
okay, I can carry some boxes from one end of the room to another end. So these are things that is, you know, and listen, I don't want to argue with you about.
No, but you're making some strong points. I'm countering this, but I'm not arguing with you. But you're making some very strong points and you are using some charged words. And I'm a little concerned about that. And so I'm
I stand by the use of
challenging on that.
discrimination, because our members certainly feel as though they are discriminated against when a project.
How can you be discriminated against when you are allowed to bid and you choose not to? You're not being discriminated
Because
against anything.
what the owner is doing is it's making a decision that if you want to work on this project, you have to abide by all of these rules, which fall outside of your decision as a business model. And in order to work on this project, you can't do business the way you want to do business. Okay, and we're talking about very qualified contractors who have very long track records of success and quality. Okay, and they've chosen to do business one way, and you are saying you can't do business your way. And if you want to work on this project, you have to change your business model. And we don't think that's fair.
Well, frankly, we're not here to support a particular business's business model.
That's
We're here
what
to
appeal
support
is.
$385 million to get a school built.
Understood,
So that is our primary interest.
completely understand. Yes.
So I think we could change.
Okay.
That maybe is a driving permit. When I go look up the companies we represent.
Mhm.
Is that available?
We make our membership lists available to members.
So you don't make the membership, you don't, because I've asked you this question before and you ran around it, so.
I don't remember you asking me a question.
But is anyone involved with this project at the moment?
Right now, who's involved, not that I'm aware of, no.
All my questions, so
Yes.
you may have to,
Okay.
since, and I understand membership decisions. Is that if I was to look up and to find out how many minorities, how many women actually work for each of these companies? There's don't worry about discrimination. Can I find out the workforce? The breakdown, how many minorities,
Yes.
by race, and by gender?
That's not data we collect from our members. So I don't, it's not that I don't give it to you, I don't.
Okay,
Did we?
that's not surprising.
Yes.
This is-
Yeah.
Okay.
Next slide. So again, just a couple of cases, these are schools built without PLAs. And what I want you to focus on here is that, so South Windsor, for example, Orchard Hill School, went incredibly well. They, after this project, they continued to build schools without PLAs. Actually, the state of Connecticut, I went to a presentation by the Office of School Construction. They held this project up to the gold standard, but 50%, 56% of the workers on the job are union workers. So I'm trying to strive to you that not going with a PLA allows everyone the opportunity to work on the project. Okay, Rocky Hill Mosier School, $11 million under budget. They actually added some safety betterments to the school. 21 bid packages or 40% of the total value went to union contractors. So we're talking about a mix, right, of union and open shop workers. Strawberry Hill School, this was, put out to bid with a PLA. 2 bids came back, $17 million over budget. It was rebid without a PLA. It had 8 bids, and again, 40% of the work being union labor. So when I stand up here and I say, we think not using a PLA means everyone gets to work on it, it's true, right? Next slide, please. And these, so our recommendation obviously is to bid the project openly, competitively, where all qualified contractors, all qualified workers have the opportunity to work on the project, do not artificially constrict the pool of responsible bidders. We think that's the best thing for Norwich. I hope you agree. I've got just a couple slides. We don't even need to, we can skip them if you'd like, Mr. Chairman, but
I just want to get this done because I still got a meeting. to
I
conduct,
understand.
but the,
Absolutely.
and allow people to ask questions.
Sure. So I'll conclude with that. I'm happy to answer questions if I can, or, you know, certainly.
You emailed me your things,
presentation.
I will, I can email the whole thing to the group.
Okay,
Just, so one of the things, the ancillary benefits of a PLA that I would want to try to duplicate would be the hiring of Norwich residents and stuff, and the job training that are offered. Are those, how could we do that and not do a PLA?
so you can include local hire goals in the contract without a PLA, so without the requirement that everyone on the job has to be hired from the union hall. I'd be interested.
I would say, who would monitor that?
Well, I think the city would monitor that. There are other cities that have local hire on municipal projects. I'd be interested if the folks in favor of a PLA, if you chose not to do a PLA, would they not hire Norwich residents? Is that only something that?
This is anecdotal, but I will tell you, one of the things that drove me nuts, because this is my second school project. And going to Kelly was the out-of-state license plates in the parking lot during the project. That drove me nuts. So, I mean, that's where all all these workers are coming from.
So I would just say that we have pretty strict licensing here in Connecticut. Reciprocity is pretty tough. So certainly on the license trades, those folks are very likely to be Connecticut residents again, if it's a PLA or not. I'd also, you know, because this was an issue that came up on the Torrington project. If you look at bid results, you know, a number of those contractors that won bids are out-of-state contractors, and that's a PLA. That's a PLA project. Same thing happened on the busway. A lot of out-of-state, that was a PLA, a lot of out-of-state residents coming in to work on that project. And you know, I think one of the proponents last month said that they could bring in out-of-state workers. If
I mean, I would expect there would be some.
and so unfortunately, we're dealing with a true worker shortage. It's real. I hear from my members all the time. Can't find enough electricians, can't find enough plumbers. And so, you know, I think you're gonna see out-of-state license plates, whether you have a PLA or not. That's just kind of my gut.
What about like job programs and stuff?
So job training, again, our members are looking for workers.
And there was one thing you said earlier at the beginning of it, I'm sorry. The journeyman versus apprenticeship. Now having, you know, back in the dark ages, actually worked in that electrical and stuff and participated in some of this stuff. You're saying the 3 journeymen to 1 apprentice is not a good, it's too big a ratio?
For hiring. So a job site ratio is 1 to 1. On a job site, you're required to have 1 journeyman person to 1 apprentice. But for hiring, after you get past the first few apprentices, you want to hire another apprentice, you got to hire 3 journeyman persons first.
On what basis, what requires that?
Stable.
State law. So the state law would apply regardless of PLA or not.
That's the hire, again, I just want to reiterate, that's a hiring goal, not a job site ratio, but yes, that's the state.
Oh, is it a state law or is it a goal?
That's the state law.
So that has nothing to do with the PLA or not.
No. My point was that we're interested in increasing the number of apprentices. We want to change that law so contractors can hire more apprentices. That was my only point in bringing that up. We're very interested in workforce development. Again, I mentioned we have a training school We hold, actually Norwich Free Academy has attended, we hold the construction career day. We get about 1,000 high school students out, they get to experience the trades. We're trying to encourage more kids to go into the trades. We have, we attend career fairs. We're really working on getting more kids into the trades. And I know the unions are too. That's certainly is a goal that I think we both have.
But do you have a registered apprenticeship or career apprenticeship program?
We do. We're registered with the Office of Higher Education. We work very closely with the Department of Labor.
With the state of Connecticut for apprenticeships in the trades?
Yes. Absolutely, 100%.
Any other questions?
Have one. Earlier in your presentation, you put solution and search for problem. There have been no strikes since they had taken. I'm just wondering what that did show.
So I think the data is only a couple years old, but that's also why I included that 2018 study, which went back, I think, to 2001. I have to double check on that, but I think the 2018 study that looked into went back to 2008 in Connecticut or 2000. Don't quote me exactly. There's been, and who could probably answer that question a little better is the folks in favor of the PLA. You include this as an important provision of the contract. How much work stoppage has there been in the last? But it's not. It really isn't a lot. And so when that's held up, it's a real reason, a selling point, to the city why you want to have a PLA when it's not actually a big problem. Again, you're paying a premium for the PLA. What are you getting in return? I don't think, that's a value. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jim.
I just wanted to give everybody else a chance because I've already been kicking in.
No, I'm good.
Mark?
Yes,
Yeah. So Chris, you gave a lot of examples. Do you have a breakdown that's more expansive that would include ones that don't fit your argument so that we can see where PLAs and cost ratios went in and how many bidders were there and such for the different projects beyond just the 5 or 6? Because quite frankly, I can't assimilate the 6 or 7 things you went through.
No, I understand the question.
Can you provide that?
And so, well, I'll say 2 things. I think I can probably provide that, although I think that the folks on the other side of the argument are probably happy to provide it, but they mentioned Killingly. I don't know of any issues with Killingly, for example.
I don't want to talk, Chris.
Yes.
I'm not looking for you to rehash individual examples. I'm looking for something that I can look at that provides me a more all-inclusive list that I can take a look at.
Yeah, I do not have that. I think I understand what you're looking for, really like a large.
What do you mean you don't have it?
Oh,
Isn't that what you do?
well, not really. But I think what the point of my argument is that.
Chris, I got that, but so what you just said to me, if I listen, is you've picked some specific examples that you gave us, but you representing the organization don't have a collection of data that's more all-encompassing that we can take a look at.
No,
So
the data, it can be difficult to come by. I think what you're looking for is a great deal of data, and I think I understand what you're asking, and I don't.
Okay. So to Mark's earlier comment about cost increases that occurred to some of the examples you gave during the COVID era, if you can conclude that we're through it, do you have data that would provide, say, 17 to 20 prior to COVID that would be more reflective of the non-inflationary pressures that occurred that you could provide us?
Well, some of the examples I gave are pre-COVID.
Can you? So
And again,
again,
that the PLA is not guaranteeing much. That's kind of what my point is, that the PLA is.
I understand your point, but I'd like to see is the data that supports your conclusion.
Peter, I will send out his slideshow to the committee, just so you know.
Yeah, but it's just limited to, you know,
Uh,
specific data. Can you provide us all the studies you went through?
I can, yes, I can.
Would you do that?
I would be happy to.
When you went through and you talked about the 89% and 86% of
Yeah.
do not support unions, is that
No,
just?
I just want to be specific with the language. It's not that they don't support a union, it's that they've chosen not to join a union.
They're
and they're
not,
in-
well, they're not in union. So is that construction workers only, or is that all?
No, that's specific to Connecticut construction.
Okay.
I believe that's the case though, Peter. I mean, those.
No,
numbers-
I was just trying to understand.
I mean, not necessarily a choice, but I mean, that's with the fact that that's a percentage of workers that are union. All right, anybody else? All right, go Joe.
So you talked about on time and on budget. So let's talk, I've got a couple of examples here. Peter, this might help you in the data question. So public school in Greenwich, $50 million over budget. Also over schedule. No, nothing, no PLA. Darien, $19 million over budget. And beyond schedule. Cromwell, 14 million. Farmington, another 14 million, so. What can you attribute those cost overruns to and
Well,
the scheduling?
so what I think I can attribute those to is that construction is not a perfect industry. So it's difficult to sometimes predict costs. And again, what I'm arguing is that the PLA doesn't guarantee those projects will be on time or on budget. So once again, I told you there are non-PLA projects that haven't gone amazingly. There are non-PLA projects that have gone amazingly. There are PLA projects that have gone well. There are PLA projects that haven't gone. So, but what a PLA does is it restricts pool of bidders, okay? And it does, you know, we can agree to disagree, but it discriminates against open shop contractors. And so if you're going to do those things, what are you getting in return? Right? And you're not getting guarantees. That's my point. So I mean, we can kind of dig into those things. And you know, you're right, there are certainly instances of open shop or not open shop. Again, these are a mix of open shop and union contractors working on these projects. So, you know, I'm not disputing those numbers. I'm just saying, what do you get into the premium measure? We have studies that show the costs do increase under PLAs, you know, including studies that we had absolutely nothing to do with. So that's kind of where we're.
Let's talk about those studies for a moment. How many of them were peer reviewed?
Well, I don't know. I'll send you the studies and we can, you know, we can dig into that. I think after the meeting, we have to dig into that.
Well, like I said, anybody can say anything they want. Yeah, so I mean, I could design a study that would make me Caesar for life, but. Just because I say it doesn't make it true. It should, you know, make it true. All right, how many contractors that would be eligible to bid and perform work on public school projects that we're talking about are affiliated with ABC?
I don't know, because I don't know who is going to bid on a project. Our contractors, you know, it may depend what the backlog looks like, what projects they're currently on. I can't tell you who's going to bid on it.
How many of them then are on the DAS approved list? Just your contractors that you represent, how many are on the DAS approved
Ballpark,
list?
I don't know, 180 maybe contractors
In our area?
in the state. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
There's only, I think, a couple of companies in Norwich that are, am I wrong in that?
I'd have to look at them.
I know one of them reached out to me. So, all right.
I'm sorry, I just wrote down a bunch of thought about questions, things I wanted to make sure. I'm just paging through it because I knew I would never remember them.
Mark, do we have, can we take it? I'm not sure how to ask this. Can we find out about this 34% that Chris talked to about the double benefit pay? Get a handle on that.
I'm certain that, I can get a response from the unions on that. You know, more specificity, if you will. I mean, because it was mentioned at the last meeting specifically. So. All right, anything else?
Well, for a company, for a job. What would be your last point why we should or should not go with the PLA? Just like 1 or 2 sentences. You gave her 40 slides, a bazillion things.
I would say you want the most competitive bidding process possible. You want a process in which 100% of qualified, responsible contractors have the opportunity, whether or not they do or not, but the opportunity to compete, because competition is what's going to get you the best product.
So, and with that, we'll thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So let's go right to reports, CSG.
You know, we've been making a lot of progress with the design. You know, you're gonna hear from DRA itself on the progress that we've made with regards to the design.
I just want to be able to hear you, that's all.
I'm sorry, I
Well, it's just because I'm in straight line.
Speak up because I
yeah.
think the microphone's on there.
Well, when the city council gets this old state of the art technology, we would have to keep moving around.
You don't need to actually constant chambers and it's actually not bad now.
Yeah. They've improved. very well.
It's actually pretty good. You know,
So there's been a lot of work underway as far as preliminary testing at the 2 sites. The borings for the Greenville site were completed actually today. We did do some test holes on the Greenville site last week, just before the just after the flood. It was either before or after, I can't. I think it was the day after. It was great that they were able to still accommodate. So it was very impressive that given what had happened with the rain, Norwich Public Works was so instrumental in helping us.
Mark Poulos is coming into the meeting for the secretary.
The testing at Stanley, they'll be out there. The boring rig is probably on site right now to do the drilling. NPW will be helping us again with the test holes, just to try and get some idea of the composition of the soil and whatnot. Also at Stanley, phase 1 environmental site assessment was performed with the help of the facilities department. So basically that's just identifying what
History,
is.
phase 1.
Oh, yeah. So, you know, that just basically to, you know, identify areas of the building that may have environmental contamination, janitor's closet, boiler room, what have you, just to, you know, investigate those areas. You know, short of that, we've been meeting with the working group from the Board of Ed Administration. The last meeting was 2 now, we're stealing some thunder.
No.
Yeah. You know, and you know, the architecture team is working on getting drawings, basically have gathered all the information that we really need at the point that we're at now to get the schematic design done. So, you know, we've been working through all the information gathering that we need. Additionally, we were in receipt of some feedback from the state regarding the grant applications. There was some additional information that they were looking for. You know, one of the items was, let me just think of the items that we had. They wanted us to provide the enrollment report, which was already provided as part of the submission. So we resubmitted that to them. One of the estimates, and this was one of the numbers was transposed as to the total amount, the grant amount. So those estimates were revised and sent to be in accordance with the amount that the state had previously approved. They were looking for the breakdown cost for the all the projects that were a part of the $385 million referendum. So we've also provided them that. And short of that, they were the Board of Education meeting minutes that approved the educational specifications were certified by the city clerk, but they wanted those to be certified by the superintendent or the executive assistant to the Board of Education. I think that's all of the items that were. You know, all those items have been sent over to the superintendent's office to be sent to the state. I'll be following back up with them tomorrow just to ensure that those made it.
I will note that, so I did get a little involved in this and that so through Kathy and, Michelle Gilman, which, Commissioner of DAS, so we had some brief back and forth. So certainly, so we, need to work on a communications plan. That was my communication to CSG, and that, the expectation of the state is that the superintendent's office, everything's going to come through the superintendent's office as far as a grant application and payment and all that stuff. So we got to make sure that everything either runs that way, or we got to develop a plan that is okay with the state, you know, as far as that goes. So right now we're going to run everything through the superintendent's office, and we anticipate getting a better response from the state, because I think that was part of the problem with the communication. So that has been more or less resolved. Michelle Gilman, you know, made it clear enough that that was their expectation. So that's what they're going to get. So they're paying most of the freight. You know, we're going to give them what they want. You know, unless they agree with something else. So. Anything else?
I think that's about it.
All right. I got kudos.
Thanks. Well, Mike's carried us through. This is a listing of project information and gathering activities. So he touched on the various survey update. No, not at all. But you know, collecting traffic information, a series of other items there. The main focus for us was really the focus on the SD package that we're putting together for the end of the month. So we have our full consultant team on that. I'll just quickly touch on a floor plan adjustment at Greenville that if you hit the next slide, Mark, this is the site at Greenville, the 3 tiers. If you hit the next, and this is the floor plan, and really it's simply prior scheme showed the gym basically sitting here. We have folded it back to this side, and this came up at one of the working group meetings. It was around safety and children moving from activities that might be gym related out to hard surface play, playground, excuse me, I have that backwards, playground, hard surface play, and grass area. This allows them to move without having to do any cross traffic. So it was a real simple adjustment. It also, I think, is going to give us a better outcome relative to the site plan in general. So that's just flipping that gym. If you go to the next slide, this is just the first floor plan. Not much has changed here. Pre-K, K, and first grade at this first floor level. Main entrances for visitor, parent drop off, and bus drop off. If you go up to the second floor, next slide, grades 2 and 3 reside here. We do have some art, music, band associated, and then up to the third floor for grades 4 and 5, and that is that connection across to the gymnasium. If you go to the next slide, one of the issues at Greenville is some tremendous grading. So this next slide helps give you a sense of kind of getting a 30-foot differential basically from the lowest portion to where the gym would reside. A series of tiered steps is the approach. So this first section is through the kindergarten wing. This is the section of that wing, and you see as it steps up with the building in the background. If you go to the next slide.
Go ahead, sorry.
How's that gonna impact drainage? You know, consider everything.
Sure. So obviously, best to see it here. This zone behind the building really has to be carefully planned to move the water off to the side. This is where, off to this side of the site, excuse me, which is to the west, is where most of the existing wetland and topography drops off. So that's where a majority of it will head. There is small area of wet retainage held on this side of the site as well. So those are the two.
By terracing it, you're just.
That makes sense.
Next up. Go to the next slide, please. It's just another series of cuts in other sections of the building. And then lastly, the item that we'd like to bring you up to speed on, if you move to the next slide. Well, I'm sorry. This is an overview in an axon. So this is Golden Street arrival, parent drop off, visitor and parent entry on that side, bus drop off here to the east. That's the tiers that we just saw in the sectional sketch, the gym at the upper level, the connection to those play fields that we spoke of. And Mark, your question in terms of that's where a majority of the wetland management occurs. Next slide.
Quick question.
No, please, yeah, go back.
Yeah,
Please.
just, so it looks like in those outdoor recreational areas, are gonna be a lot of cut and fill.
Excellent.
Some height, yeah, well, yeah, it's great
This-
topography.
Entire area up here, it's a large cut. And that's in one of the next slides, is just saying in terms of constraints within the project. At this project, it's the amount of earth moving. At the Stanton project, it's actually the available area to build on. The wetlands have significantly constrained.
Because we're building a school that's still gonna be open.
Well, that's another factor for sure.
So we're gonna cut and haul then, we know a lot of stuff.
That's part of the analysis that has to be done by the cost estimators in terms of, you know, where we're at, but it's gonna be predominantly a cut site.
Okay,
And to that point that Jim just made, you know, that's part of the reason that these borings, festivals have been going on, just so that we can get a real understanding of what's under there.
Quality of the material in the boring log is gonna matter in terms of whether it's, we can use it.
yeah, if it's schist, then.
Clay.
Somewhere.
As I mentioned, these were some of the concerns within this site, and certainly it's that cut and fill is kind of right at the top of the list. It's one of the major challenges for us within this site. Next slide. And then it just shifting over quickly to Stanton, the existing Stanton School is here. New London Turnpike off to the side. This is a very different profile. All this blue represents wetland as flagged by our wetland soil scientists. It really leaves us that area as our main buildable zone within the site. If you go to the next slide, we do have the site plan as the proposed configuration. New London Turnpike, we have parent drop off, which comes in, parent drop off and arrival, bus drop off on a separate loop and its arrival. We have main entrance and basically after hours use in terms of gymnasium, cafeteria, etc. If we go quickly to the next slide, we can share the first floor plan. This is a two-story scheme. So in this approach, we have pre-KK, first and second grade, all of academics within this zone. And as I said, the more community-focused after hours, band, music, cafeteria, gymnasium through a separate entry available. So we can easily segregate the building, lock it down for after hours so the academic area can be safely just held off from the public activities. And on the next slide, we do have the second floor of this.
And it's basically grades 3, 4, and 5 at this second floor level with the media center. The next slide will give you another three-dimensional view. So as I said, from New London Turnpike, dedicated bus loop through this zone and entry, parent drop-off through this zone and to entry. As I said, academic and community in terms of separation. Next slide. Our focus over the last several weeks has been elevational studies on both projects. So going to share a few of our initial concepts. A lot of different types of sketching, a lot of activity. For the Greenville, some of our key kind of challenges, the topography within the site, it's a fairly large site, but we have a constrained area for building. So it's trying to mitigate that. And so, as I said, over the last several weeks, a lot of focus within questions of how we can modulate the building, allow to break down the skin, help it feel less large if we can by using various conventions of material and windows, that type of thing. Go to the next slide. So some real rough sketching, but ideas of how do we break down the vertical volume, possibly some brows that come out of the building, identifying areas where we want to draw focus, main entry point, etc. Next slide. Developing that further so we can understand it and study it. And next slide. So if we focus on a single elevation so that we can kind of focus on it and look at what are the tools available to us. If we move to the next. This pretty conventional kind of fenestration in terms of the window patterning, the entrances, etc. Utilizing two different materials to help break down the overall kind of composition of the building. As I said, some brows to create shade and shadow line on the elevation. All of this taken together to try to reduce the overall size, sense of the building, etc. We roll to the next slide, just a minor tweak to this, and it's more traditional elements like headers, sill plates, water courses, etc. The next slide, a little freer approach where we look at window sill heights. The interesting thing about this building, we have your very youngest students all the way up through 5th grade, so K to 5. We move to the next slide. Part of the reason for kind of asking about those window heights, if you start with a 3 to 5 year old and you know how tall they are, for us adults, it would be the same as us within a 5-year period of having somebody who's 7 or 8 feet tall as the norm. So very different animals. And to that end, if we can create windows that address that group, it makes it their building. So it's things like handrails and stair towers, windows for the youngest students, really having them feel as though this building is made for them is something that's one of the things we strive. And so that was some of the window patterning that we were looking for. You know, it's a bit more playful. It addresses this real need of being able to get your youngest students eye heights and visions outlets to the exterior. Next slide. And so this is kind of taking some of that and applying it across. This is the pre-K wing. As I said, through this zone, pre-K, 1st grade, 2nd and 3rd, 4th and 5th. Begins a little tighter as you get to the top and a little bit less of that modulation in it. This type of larger window volume trying to draw attention to the main entrance sequence. If we go to the next slide, this is just a quick study and model of that coming together, and then as the building turns, having the same type of thing happen as it breaks back down to this lower scale. And one more slide, please.
And in terms of material use within the building, as I said, looking at using a couple different materials, both for texture as well as color. Some samples, terracotta plank systems, which can provide horizontal and vertical slats. Greg is helping us out down there.
Vanna down there.
The reason why we brought that with us, one of the questions during the working group was, are these materials hard wearing? Are they materials that'll last an expected life cycle? Are they going to be a maintenance issue? Well, the terracotta plank is something that very much serves as masonry would serve, and that was the reason for pairing with it. It provides a different kind of texture, a different feel to the facility, so that's important. Masonry units used throughout, and then some metal panel systems in specialty areas kept high, so that from a durability standpoint and a maintenance standpoint, we can address it, but it offers an opportunity for color. You can just go to the next. And we did a similar set of studies for the Stanton project, wide variety of sketches done by our team. If we go to the first, same type of kind of, one more slide, please. Overarching studies looking at entry sequence and arrival and how you announce a building. So it's kind of taking in the overview. And if we move to the next slide, tightening that up and starting to try to put some approaches architecturally to it. Next slide. And again, just focusing on a singular elevation so that we can kind of dig in a bit deeper. Next slide, please. And so again, very simple sketching early on, moving to more complex sketching on the next slide, where we start using computer modeling to study material color selection, window. Again, using a similar approach in terms of offering a variety of windows, heights and sills throughout the building. Next slide. And then looking at how color can really shift the feel of a building. But again, an idea of terracotta plank, masonry, metal, and glass. Really simple systems, but hard wearing systems for selection here. Next slide. And this gives a sense that, you know, where we look at the terracotta slat, it can be used both in vertical and horizontal orientation. So it gives a little bit of complexity as well as different shade and shadow line within the skin of the building. And that coupled with traditional masonry materials. And next slide. And then consideration of kind of, these are not flat facades. These are volumetrically shaped. So this study showing that idea of entry, projection, cover for entry, etc., as an approach to the building. Your Sally Port. And I think, yes, well, actually,
It'll be just as hard.
Safety and security standpoint, Greg will be happy to talk about that as we get into kind of design development. I think that's it for what we wanted to share this evening as an update. Yep. And I did mean to say Happy New Year to everybody. That's the first time in front of you this year.
I love the progress so far. Just, you know, just me personally, I love what you're doing. What I really liked was the colonnade with the shade overhangs that you applied to the facade in one of the earlier sketches before you started thinking about modulating the windows. If you think about maybe bringing those two things together in some way,
and possibly not well represented, they still exist.
oh, okay.
We do not have the column supporting their cantilevers, but that shade and shadow still happens on that elevation. It is something that we think really will help and break down the scale of the building.
Mark Kulos? You want to unmute? There you go.
All right. I know it's probably early in the design process. Have you thought of using like solar tube lighting for to bring in natural lighting into interior spaces?
Well, we do have some interior spaces that could benefit from that approach, and it's something that we can look at and consider in terms of dropping that light in. We have used it in some of our projects.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else for Darren? Greg Colossi?
Talk about separation of like the academic wing from the gymnasium and music side. I could see it with that bridge for Greenville to the gym, but how is it separated in Stanton? I didn't see, and it could be that it's just not there yet, but
Yeah.
doors separating that wing from the academic.
That is exactly what it will be, Greg. It's trying to find those points where we have, there will be cross-border control, fire doors that can close down.
They're just
and
not there yet.
They're on their way.
Okay. I didn't see it. It's in the works. Okay.
But from a large-scale programming approach, that eastern wing at Stanton is all of the kind of community type spaces.
Yeah.
And the two-story bar is really all of the academic spaces. So there's a natural division point between the two.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I
we'll
just,
get
I didn't
there.
see the doors.
Yeah.
And they're not in there.
They're not
yet,
there.
So my vision is good and they will be there. Thank you.
It also designed really well from the standpoint that if I'm correct in saying this, there's no second floor over those. The majority of the cafeteria, gym.
No, there's
For stand, so you wouldn't have sound travel between the floors, you know, typically.
Yep.
You know, keeping the noisier activities away from the academic thing.
Well, I think you hit on it. What you did was you avoided the cost
Yeah,
of negating the sound,
yeah,
by
that's
separating the space.
true,
And Stanton, the public spaces are on the west side.
yeah.
Jefferson, east of where you start up the hill. So all the public, the gym and everything else is the west side of that. But part of the advantage of separating those noisy spaces, you can save money on the construction side. You can put a gym virtually anywhere in a school and make it quiet, which pay for it.
And I think it
And
works,
you worked in the schools. Yeah.
and I think it works out well from, you know, communities used to the building.
That's my big,
Have to look back,
is if we have something with students.
Now you're the opportunity to literally block it off and then have whoever you need in community centric space.
Anyone else? I have a question for three of you.
Yeah.
Basically. Greg Carrigan, we've heard from a group of the PLA, a group against the PLA, for lack of a better term. Based on the amount of data that was presented, it's almost too much to absorb. On your experience, have you found the PLA worked or didn't work? I'm just trying to, I apologize for putting you on the spot. To help us make a decision, I'm asking for an outside opinion.
I can tell you that several of the projects that they pointed to were mine.
Okay.
And I'll stop there. That's, I'd rather not go into that, Greg. It's an awkward question at an awkward time in the project, but there is a lot of data on that both sides have pointed to. And it would be nice if it was more readily accessible. But you've got two sides that are arguing particular points.
No, we're just looking.
No, I'm not saying you're arguing, I'm saying
I'm
folks behind me and the gentlemen to the left are arguing their particular point of view.
right.
And some of the projects that they pointed to on both sides of that were projects that I did. So we've lived through them, both PLA and non-PLA projects, and we all came out whole.
And I'm trying to mirror the same sentiment I've worked on under both scenarios.
Yeah, I think Mark's point is really well made. A lot of the data that you're looking at now for the most recent budgets are skewed by Cromwell's
good example of a budget that was put together prior to COVID. And what was the other one you picked, Farmington High School, was a budget put together pre-COVID. And they both came in over budget, they both had to struggle. The term that I don't like being used the way it was used is value engineering. It's not value engineering if you start to degrade the building or degrade the program. That's cheapening the program. That's not value engineering. Value engineering is putting the gym somewhere else so you don't pay for sound attenuation. That's value engineering.
Engineering is a cheapening of project.
Value engineering is achieving the same end at the same quality for less money. That's value engineering. So you'll hear that term over and over and over again.
I've heard it for lifetime.
Yeah. And it's achieving the same end at the same quality for less money. That's value.
I've been out for 40 years. A lot of projects. I have not done a deal. So Greg is our team's experience relative to dealing with them. I haven't been. Likewise, on the other side, some of my projects were cited there. So
I just want to add, just.
No, personally, I recognize it. But it puts them in an awkward situation.
But then again, there are
Because
there are experts that we hired. We hired them for their expert opinion.
As architects, yeah. Okay. Anything else, guys?
I just wanted to give you that update. As I said, major focus of the team is next Wednesday. We're delivering our SD package, and that includes our consulting, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection.
SD is schematic design.
Yes, sir.
Just to be an active, make sure everyone's got the enactment.
I do have one more.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Velazzi, you may ask your question.
My big thing. I probably just not there yet for Greenville. Is there an outdoor way of egress to get up and down that hill to there and back and travel? Is there any plan for that, or is it only through the building that you can get from, to do that 30 feet?
Yeah, that's a great question. Currently, there is not a pathway envisioned connecting the two. So that's something we'll have to think about.
And the difference between what's out there now, the staircase that connects it and what you're building now is ADA.
The bill is there.
No, when the original building was built, you could connect with just the staircase.
Yeah.
Can't do that anymore. Because now when you change grades and you make it available to people, you have to make it available to everyone.
Yeah.
So we can get 35 feet worth of steps to work. But 35 feet worth of ramp is 300.
Yeah, you would need a football field. Stick it in there.
It's the planning around moving students.
Yeah.
We're having something like that, considering it now.
Clear though, for the younger students, there is outdoor play area at that lowest level. There is indoor play area at that lowest level. That's something that, from an educational programming standpoint, pre-K and first grade have that availability at that level. The idea of the students using the upper playground are for the older level, and these playscapes are age appropriate. So they're geared towards those younger students or the older students at the upper, in terms of size and scale, various pieces of practice.
Yes, I'm thinking the worst case scenario, you couldn't go through the building, you couldn't get on Golden Street, you needed to move the students up.
Yep.
This is just an emergency situation.
I hear you.
The administration plan around that, but there's no way to do that. And again, this is a worst case scenario, it's something that we actively think about.
Yeah.
Okay. On level ground, it's not something that we have to think about.
Well, I can tell you, we challenged our landscape architect with a lot so far on this site.
He hasn't put yet.
I just figured I'd ask.
No, it's
This will be a resume over.
Thank you.
the only other I don't know, I just wanted to add, was, just wanted to publicly thank, Public Works for helping efforts to get all the digging and everything.
Yes, I certainly
done.
saw the emails and stuff,
Yeah,
and,
they,
Pat McLaughlin. was
They've
certainly,
been well on it. They, you know,
Very
right
helpful.
after a flood, right after a snowstorm, right after, you know, with everything they have on their plate, they've been very helpful to us. I appreciate it.
That's good. I'll pass that along. All right, is there anything from Downs today?
Good evening, everybody. Jeff Anderson. I'll be brief. I think it's already been said. We're anxiously waiting for the schematic design set of documents so that we can dive in and develop the first detailed estimate for the town of Norwich, for the city of Norwich. And also, we do have a schedule developed that hopefully, as we conclude that estimate, we'll start to track moving forward to ensure we're staying in line with the remaining cycles of drawing development, and of course, getting to the point of bidding as we anticipate and getting to a construction start date. But that's it.
Yeah, I know you're kind of early in your process there, so.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go right to invoices, man. Let's get this thing going. CSG Greenville number 10, $680,000, excuse me.
I like
I'll put my glasses back on.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion by Sheila Hay. Second, is that you? Second by Stacy Gould. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Peter Gauthier,
Yes.
Mark Poulos,
Yes.
Dean DeStazio,
Yes.
Bill Hall,
Yes.
Joe DeLucia.
Yes.
Stacy Gould.
Yes.
Greg Galassi.
Yes.
Sheila Hayes.
Yes.
Yes. Greg, Mark, yes. 10-0. Oh, actually, we got 11. We got 11. Did I miss someone?
Christine dropped off. Check the arrow. Click on the blue arrow. Oh, there she is. She's back.
No, I haven't dropped off. I'm just trying to hear.
We didn't recognize the bedpost.
No problem. It's the only quiet place in the house.
All right. Stanton up 10 CSG, $10,555.46. Motion to approve, please.
Greg Carabon makes motion.
Greg Carabon, second.
Sheila.
Sheila Hayes for the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll do this again. Christine DeStazio,
Yes.
Mark Poulos,
Yes.
Peter Gauthier,
Yes.
Sam Hall,
Yes.
Cindy Beauregard,
Yes.
DeLucia,
Yes.
Stacy Gould.
Yes.
Greg Galassi.
Yes.
Sheila Hayes.
Yes.
Greg Carabin, and myself, yes, 11-0. Thank you. For DRA, Greenville number 3. Invoice dated 12/20/23. $118,367.50. I will note that this includes the CLA in the particular. For the additional surveying and stuff that was necessary. Motion to approve, please. Stacy Gould. There's a second. Sheila Hayes for the second. Any discussion? Hearing none. One more time. Mark Poulos,
Yes.
Cindy Beauregard,
Yes.
Peter Gauthier,
Yes.
Bill Hall,
Yes.
Steve DeStazio,
Yes.
DeLucia,
Yes.
Stacy Gould.
Yes.
Greg Galassi.
Yes.
Sheila Hayes.
Yes.
Greg Carabin. And myself, yes, 11, thank you. Next one, Stanton number 3. $96,525.31. That's without my glass, so everybody keep an eye on that.
I'll make a motion.
Stacy Gould, second.
Sheila Hayes. State.
Sheila Hayes with the second. Any discussion? Hearing, seeing none. We'll go this time. Joe DeLucia.
Yes.
Stacy Gould.
Yes.
Greg Galassi.
Yes.
Sheila Hayes.
Yes.
Greg Carabin. Myself, yes. Christine DeStazio.
Yes.
Steve Beauregard.
Yes.
Peter Gauthier.
Yes.
Bill Hall.
Yes.
Mark Poulos.
Yes.
11-0. Thank you, everyone. Anything else to be brought before the committee?
And Mark, this is Peter Gothier. When do we need to make a decision on the PLA?
I think the PLA is gonna be, wind up being a city council decision, to be honest with you.
That was my second question.
Because it's gonna be a contract between the city and whatever, so. All right, although it could come back here for a recommendation or something. If, if it goes that far.
So based on that, are you gonna bring that to the city council and ask if they want a recommendation, or whether they're just gonna?
I would expect that, that will come from the floor. So. Sure, I can't anticipate what the council's gonna do.
Got it. But you're gonna ask them first?
It's gonna have to go on an agenda for the city council to consider, and then what the city council does with it is what the city council does.
All I'm asking, Mark, is.
Is there going to be, Mark,
Go ahead, Mark. Mark, anyone else?
yeah, also wondering if there's supposed to be any Board of Ed action on the PLA too.
I do not believe so.
All right, thanks.
All right, anything else?
So is there a due date for us to make?
Well, we gotta do something before we start bidding the project. Either yes or, you gotta know whether there is one before you bid the project. So is there something more for us to do yet?
I don't know. There's probably always something more for us to
Yeah,
do.
I know, as far as this
It does,
goes.
in terms of, if it goes to, council has to make a decision, if they come back to us for
The
a
recommendation.
recommendation. The teacher inside of me is asking, when is our homework due date assignment for us coming back with this?
That will depend on the city council.
So at least another month or two.
Yeah.
Mark, can I ask
Yeah.
a question?
Sure.
Chris D'Estacio. Is there any way we can make a posting for people to know what's going on and where we're at? Just to give people information, keep them informed.
Yeah, we can take a look at that.
Yeah, I just think people would appreciate it,
Some kind of status on the project.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Basically a summary of our meeting, kind of, right?
Might be a bad idea. Anybody else? Anybody? Hearing none, a motion to adjourn will be in order. By Stacy Gould, second. Sheila Hayes, seconds. All in favor, Christine D'Estasio,
Aye.
Mark Kulos,
Aye.
Peter Gothier,
Yes.
Jim Hall,
yes.
Cindy Beauregard,
Yes.
Joe DeLucia,
Yes.
Stacy Gould,
Yes.
Greg Velazquez.
Yes.
Sheila Hayes.
Yes.
Greg Carabin. Mark Bettencourt, yes. 11-0. We stand adjourned at 8:24 p.m. Thank you for playing, everybody.